It's time for the Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action. Here's your host, Marc Little.
Hi, this is Marc Little, and this is the Marc Little Show. I am your host. I'm a pastor. I'm a lawyer. I'm a political commentator. And I do my best to bring you the truth. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what's on the ballot in this upcoming election. An election that is consequential beyond measure. An election that could change the course of our country. Liberty is on the ballot. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to brush by important topics and we're going to delve into one. We're going to run by inflation, gas, education, indoctrination, crime, a government that has overreached itself over the last 2 years and wants to be reelected. And then we're going to round the bend with the sanctity of human life. Stay tuned. This is Marc Little, and you're listening to The Marc Little Show.
Do you have an upcoming event that you would like to invite Marc to speak at? As a pastor, attorney, and political commentator, Marc travels the nation and spreads the hope of Jesus Christ to audiences of all types. Melding his rich life experiences, his passion for the Word of God, and his extensive knowledge of politics and the law, Marc has a very unique perspective that joins believers all over the globe together as the united body of Christ. To book him as a guest speaker at your next event, head on over to cure-action.com/book. That's cure-action.com/book. Welcome back. This is Marc Little. I'm a pastor, a lawyer, and a political commentator. Thank you for joining me. We have a consequential election on the horizon, and liberty at the end of the day is what's on the ballot. If our Democrat friends, and some considered not so friendly, take back the Senate as an example, we can be assured that they will get rid of the filibuster that they have used so artfully. Go back to Harry Reid. They used it when it worked for them. Now they want to get rid of it. They want to get rid of the 60-vote threshold so that they can pass their radical left agenda. That would include making D.C. and Puerto Rico a states, adding senators to the Senate. They do that again by getting rid of the filibuster. And then they will also expand, they call it court packing, but in actuality it is expanding the United States Supreme Court. That has worked quite well with 9 for, I believe it's over 100 years. And then finally, they want to centralize our elections so that we don't go through this foolishness of requiring photo IDs. So we don't have to go through the foolishness of ensuring that people who vote are citizens. We don't have to go through the foolishness of making sure that people go to an organized and certified and regulated polling station, as opposed to all of the drop boxes that Mark Zuckerberg placed all across our nation in partnership with quote-unquote community-based organizations. They're all crooks, is what they are. And we're finding that out as we continue to uncover what happened in the 2020 election. No, I'm not going to talk about whether Trump won the presidency or not. You decide for yourself. When you see 3 states stop counting all at the same time, you draw your own conclusions. But that's not the subject of this podcast as we go into electing men and women of Congress in our midterm elections. Critical time for the country. Inflation. Everybody's experiencing inflation. Don't matter who you are, rich or poor. You may have the capacity to pay more. Most people don't want to pay more, even if they're wealthy. Inflation is at an all-time record high in this country. It is just frightening. We've got inflation here
at an historic 8.2% as of the end of September 2022. Let's see. Here is what inflationdata.com says, and this is important. Based on the Rule 72, if inflation is 7.2, it will likely take 10 years for prices to double. But with 8.2%, inflation prices will double in roughly 8.8 years. Imagine what it would be like to pay twice as much for everything just over 8 years from now. Let that sink in. And it goes on to say, usually high inflation rates also correspond to high interest rates, as lenders need to compensate for the decline in purchasing power of future interest and principal repayments. This results in higher costs of doing business and place an overall drag on the economy. Here it is. The inflation rate plays an important role in determining the health of an economy. Countries with extremely high inflation rates are said to have hyperinflation. And when this occurs, the economy is often near collapse. There you have it. The United States has a historic inflation rate. No matter what Joe Biden says, he wants to talk about the unemployment rate. He doesn't talk about the participation rate. Notice that, which is the real number. Because people aren't looking for jobs because we're paying them to stay home. So you can't look at the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is calculated by the people out looking for jobs. The workforce participation rate tells you who's working. When that number is high, like it was under President Trump, you have people dropping off of food stamps because they don't qualify. You got to look past the surface. Dig a little deeper to understand what they're really saying. They're blowing smoke. Number 2, gas prices. Gas prices are at an all-time record high. People can't even afford to get to work when gas prices are skyrocketing like they are. Here it is. In California, the average is 5.23 cents. I got to tell you, it says here on Forbes, California prices, and this is written October 5th, 22. California gas prices are approaching record high levels and averaging $6.42 at the pump on Wednesday, almost double the national average. Yeah, 6.42 cents. And Joe Biden wants to brag that gas prices are coming down. Why would he do that? When he came in, they were just over $2. Why do we care that it's going from $6.42 down to $6? It's an outrageous political stunt. It's unbelievable. And so it's important to note that what's called distillate, when you look at gas prices, there are a lot of things behind the scenes. But one of those things is the importing of diesel fuel. And the problem that we've got right now with diesel fuel that we'll be experiencing a shortage, which impacts everything we do. When trucks can't bring in product, guess what? There's no product. And so very reputable sources say one of the reasons for that is because we've stopped taking Russian imports. But that begs another question. Just a short 2 years ago, we were energy independent. We didn't need to get oil from any place else. We were net exporters of energy. And so this is a problem. We've got a government that is peeing on our leg and telling us that it is raining. I'm sorry for the crude example, but it is the truth. It's the truth. It is not raining. This stuff is the response of horrible policies, driven in part by climate change. You don't want to drill because of the environment, but yet you'll let somebody in another country drill and ship you oil, darn their environment. Either you are concerned about the environment or you're not. It's a bunch of baloney. And we need to wake up. We need to look beyond the surface and do our homework. It's very, very unfortunate. Now, diesel, you should know, does fluctuate seasonally. It fluctuates based on farming. When they're farming and when they're then going to maintaining their equipment. Diesel fuel fluctuates seasonally. But the third reason given by Forbes is the loss of Russian imports have caused problems for refineries as they struggle to fill holes in their product slates. There it is. We were net independent. Now we're struggling to get this country still running. It is very, very sad. Education is the other issue that's on the ballot. All these things are on the ballot. Education is on the ballot. School choice is on the ballot. Kids are stuck in failing schools. Failing schools that are indoctrinating them, not just with Marxist ideology, that includes taking God out of the culture, promoting immorality, like every show you see now has got a homosexual couple in it. And it seems everywhere you turn. They're normalizing things. They now have drag queens in the library reading to our children in elementary school. They've got kids who want or think they identify as a separate, opposite sex. And in school, they call them by their pronouns. When they get home, parents don't know anything about it. That's what's happening in schools today. We've got porno in elementary school and secondary school libraries. We don't know nothing about it. We found out about it, guess what? The government sicked the DOJ, the Department of Justice, on parents who wanted to stand against this kind of indoctrination. Indoctrination of sexuality, indoctrination of confusion, an indoctrination that gives kids hormone blockers without parental consent that stunt their growth. We've got kids transitioning at young ages. I once heard a comedian say, I wanted to be a pirate when I was young. We've got teachers who are undermining the role of parents and helping kids do very harmful things to themselves. This is what's happening in America. And it is on the ballot. And be clear about it. Education with CRT, teaching reverse racism with critical race theory. You can't fight racism with racism. You've got to fight racism by meeting it with love, number one, because racism is a matter of the heart. And when racism is beyond an individual and it is infected an institution, then there are laws and ways to combat that. We need to get after it where there is a lack of equal opportunity. But don't give me you want equity. That simply means tearing somebody else down so you can raise somebody else up who may not have worked as hard to get what we're trying to give them. So let's call it what it is. We want equal opportunity. We don't want equity. We don't want equal results. And now they don't even want equal results. They want to just tear down what they consider the oppressor, the white, heterosexual, cisgendered male, able-bodied, born here, native born. They just want to tear him down and make everybody else an oppressed. That's a podcast for another day. But critical race theory is a poison. It is a poison pill that has been unleashed into our schools, and it's not new. It's not new. It's liberation theology just repackaged. It's black liberation theology repackaged. It's Max Horkheimer and his ilk out of the Frankfurt School, all atheists. It's their identity politics repackaged under intersectionality, brought to us by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. That's what's happening. Ibram X. Kendi said, yeah, you fight discrimination with reverse discrimination. That's what's happening. And it is wrong. And we must stand up against it because they're poisoning the next generation. Those are the facts. And then crime. Crime. BLM running around after 2014 and Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot, that we determined was not true. And then they marched across the bridge, pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. And our law enforcement officers have been defunded, demoralized, assassinated. It is unbelievable what we have seen happen in this country in such a short period of time. Particularly after we saw riots in 2020 where people were killed, White House attack, St. John's Church lit a fire, statues of Frederick Douglass of all people and Abraham Lincoln, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, torn down. This is an anti-America movement, Marxism. It's an anti-family movement, Marxism. Coming against the nuclear family, making our cities less safe by pushing the police out. And these idiots who run our large cities, they just happen to be blue, and city councils following their lead, and these corporate titans who appear to be on crack, funding the BLM, a global network organization. What's wrong with these people? And now we have a corollary to rising crime. And now our Democrat friends want to act like they never said it. We heard Cori Bush. We heard Joe Biden, by the way. They had a convention while there were riots going on right across America, and they never even mentioned it in the Democrat convention. These people are wacko. Let's call it what it is. We've got Portland, based on Manhattan Institute report back in 2020. Increase in homicides, 533% increase. That's Portland, 533% increase. Milwaukee, 132% increase. Atlanta, up 58%. Philadelphia, up 37%. Shootings in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, shootings. 42% New York, 51%, 18% Chicago, increases. That was just 2020. These statistics come out a year late. But even now, today, with those reports, it's still getting worse. We've got a report on the 10 most violent cities in America. Unbelievable. You've got St. Louis topping the chart with an increase in crime. 263 murders, a 420% increase. And then we've got our beloved Detroit, 330 murders. Chicago, of course, continues to lead the way. Crime is on the ballot. And politicians who act like crime is not an issue, like the governor in New York, who in her debate suggested that it was a silly question to talk about crime. And then the mayor of New York tells people taking the subway, well, just be more careful. Listen, these people are nuts, and we've got to rout them out because they're destroying our country based on the things that I just said. But here's what we've got to talk about today. We've got to talk about something that President Obama just said as he was stumping in Wisconsin. We'll come right back after you listen to this.
He also deserves somebody who's going to stand up for a woman's right to make her own health care decision. Now, abortion has been controversial since I've been around. And I genuinely believe that there are good people of conscience who may differ with me on this issue. But we should all agree that women everywhere should be able to control what happens with their own bodies. And it shouldn't be controversial to say that the most personal personal of healthcare decisions, the most profound of personal choices should be made by a woman and her doctor and not by a bunch of mostly male politicians sitting in a state capitol or sitting in Washington and don't know nothing about
it. It is outrageous. It's all wrong, and it's outrageous. He fails to mention the baby in the room, who is a person. Baby, Jeremiah 1:5. I knew you before you were born in your mother's womb. Yeah. 6 weeks. Heart starts pumping. Why does it start pumping? It's pumping blood. Yeah. Blood represents life. A baby, personhood, life. And we sit around talking about a woman's right to murder her child. What's wrong with us? We don't tell the story. I've got an abortion miscarriage recovery ministry. And I see men and women who have had an abortion. And the effects of abortion are unbelievable. People don't even realize it. Abortion results in many, not all, but many, suicidal ideation, promiscuity, anger management, addiction. The list goes on and on and on. Why? Because murdering your child is not natural. It's not natural. But this culture, who is overcome by demonic forces, that's right, I said it. It's demonic. The Satanic Temple said abortion is a ritual for them. Yeah, I'm compassionate about women who have become pregnant because of trauma, because of molestation, because of rape. I absolutely am compassionate with her condition and her plight, and we need to make sure that the people responsible for putting her in that situation pay a heavy price. But what we've got to come to is not punishing the innocent child. Child didn't do it. Child shouldn't pay. And I know plenty of folks, Israel Houghton being one of them, product of rape. Yes, it's a horrible thing to happen. I get it. And women would rather go to God with an abortion than to the church with an unplanned pregnancy, no matter the circumstance. And that's because we condemn people as leaders. Romans 8:1. Now, therefore, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. We need to start walking that out so that women don't feel that they need to run to the abortion clinic. And men also have a role to play, no matter what the culture says, no matter what the Supreme Court said. The Bible says that men are the heads of the house. And if our wives and our girlfriends are running off to the abortion clinic, then we need to be first in line to raise our hands and say, my fault. Because the statistics say that if women had the support of the man involved, they wouldn't have done it. We have a role to play, and we need to talk about that. Abortion is a stain on this nation. 62 million babies aborted, 20 million of them black. We want to talk about slavery, and the folks that were enslaved are the ones running and murdering their children in the Planned Parenthood clinics. What is wrong with us? What's wrong with us? And so in closing, I want to simply litigate the issue of abortion. Since we're talking about it, Roe v. Wade was overturned in the Dobbs case based on the 10th Amendment and is now going to the states for people who are citizens of those states to decide, and that is the right thing to do. California is leading the way in making sure we're a sanctuary state, murdering children, even for women who don't live here. And we'll pay the price for that. These leaders will pay the price for that. Oh yeah, they'll pay the price for it. And so we are now looking at 50 states now dealing with whether or not they will allow abortion, and if so, at what level. But we've got Democrats like Barack Obama who clearly are supporting candidates who don't mind a baby being aborted up until the day of birth. And if you're in California under SB 2223, what I call the infanticide bill, you can kill it right after it's born. And in some instances, up 12 months. These people are demonic. We need to say it. As they stand up and cheer, they are supporting demonic practices under the guise of women's health care. No, this ain't no pap smear. This is murdering a child. Child's in the room. Taxpayers are in the room. It's not just the woman and the doctor. We are paying for it. The child's paying for it. Let's tell the truth, President Barack Obama. That narrative, once upon a time, you said it was above your pay grade. I guess you've learned some things now. Unfortunately, you haven't learned them from the Bible. And so let's litigate this thing for a minute. Let's talk about the history of abortion. Let's talk about the fact that things were done in this country in response to the freed slaves. Before they were freed, they made sure that gun laws were in place in places like Virginia in the 1700s because they didn't want us using the guns on them. That's where gun laws come from, y'all. And so now we're dealing with the issue of emancipation, 1865. Now the slaves are free. Guess what? Slave masters were scared. Would you blame them? I get it. And so whites and some wealthy whites began what's called the eugenics movement. Eugenics movement, yes. Eugenics was a movement to control the Negro race in the United States. That's right. It was a movement to kill off future Negro populations. Eugenics did fail. We all know that over time. But it wasn't because they didn't try. The movement successfully imposed sterilization on large groups of black people by the thousands. Eugenics. And they forced sterilization on girls as young as 10 years old. Does that sound familiar based on what's happening in our school system today? What they're doing to elementary school kids and kids in middle high, confusing them with their gender, confusing them, giving them hormone blockers and the like without parental consent. Margaret Sanger was sterilizing kids as young as 10 years old. And we're just Margaret Sanger. It's eugenics movement. Adolf Hitler mimicked the American eugenics playbook. In this playbook, there were constitutional challenges, Maryland and other states, and it was not upheld. They faced constitutional challenges, but Adolf Hitler saw what we were doing. And he said, I think I like that. And he used it. We don't often say this, but he exterminated black people. How many? I've never seen that number. But he exterminated black people and Jews. I'm sure that number exists. He exterminated black people and Jews. Eventually, eugenics slithered below the ground and got a bad name from Nazi Germany. And the name eugenics became unpopular. In fact, people stopped using it. And the so-called movement died. But the architects just changed the name. They didn't go away, and neither did their goal. Reducing the growth of the black population around the world, but especially in the United States, was still the goal. and by any means necessary. Negative eugenics is what they then started calling it. And negative eugenics created an environment to convince blacks to limit their number of children. It's called race suicide. And they use poverty as a means to make it acceptable. You can't afford to feed another mouth. And with the help of people like Adam Clayton Powell out of New York, our community, black community, went along with it. And in 1932 is when this sort of thing was happening, when Margaret Sanger established the American Birth Control League in Harlem. Miss Sanger, just before that, we knew who she was. Nobody did the research, obviously. We knew who she was. She was a racist, a KKK card-carrying member. And here's what she said, and I quote, we're paying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all. End quote. That's Margaret Sanger. The American Birth Control League, 20 years after that quote, and let's see, 10 years after she landed in Harlem, the American Birth Control League changed its name. See, when they get found out, they just change the name. They just slither into another shape. They're shapeshifters. They just slither into another form. 1942, Margaret Sanger changed the name of the American Birth Control League to Planned Parenthood. And it is now the largest purveyor of the slaughter of the preborn in the United States. And many of you know that our taxpayer dollars, depending on who's the president, through the Hyde Amendment and through the Mexico City policy, we fund, in part, domestic and international abortions. They just love killing babies. I've never seen anything like it. It's something to behold. They can't bend over backwards far enough to tell the lie of a woman's right to choose, when what they really are saying is we love slaughtering children before they get here. Why? Well, it's big business. It's big business. Just like climate change. Big business. They harvest these little baby parts. They do stem cell research, and they harvest these baby parts. And the older the baby is, the more valuable a heart and so forth becomes. That's what these people are doing, and they've got no conscience. Herman Gosnell, caught in Philadelphia, he talked about aborting a kid that was big enough to walk himself to the bus stop. These are sociopaths. And we even have black women who have been at the helm of Planned Parenthood and on the board right now. I don't know who these people are. Do they understand what they're doing? This is not a thing to do out of convenience. You put a baby up for adoption out of convenience. You don't murder the child out of convenience. But we have a history of that, going back to slavery, where women would rather their child be dead than to be born or live as slaves. Yeah. This is deep. And Barack Obama talks about dig a little deeper, go past the surface. But he don't go past the surface on this issue. No. He doesn't want to talk about this history. See, abortion needs to be on trial. Like we have somebody who has been alleged of committing a crime. And we use their history to determine whether or not they have a criminal pattern. And then we always use it as sentencing to determine what the sentence should be. Yeah, we need to be talking about abortion history every time we mention it, because this diabolical, demonic history is playing itself out, and we're acting like it's about us. We're acting like it's about not wanting to feed another mouth. No, you've just played into the hands of the enemy, who's attempting to remove the imago Dei of God, the image of God, from the earth. Now, today, Planned Parenthood clinics are located primarily in black communities. Is it any wonder that abortion continues to be the #1 cause of death in the black community? Margaret Sanger was able to be successful because she studied and understood the black community. At that time, when she was walking the earth as a racist KKK card-carrying member, the church was the epicenter of black life, and the pastor was a primary leader. Sanger formed the Negro Project, whereby she convinced these black pastors, these idiots, to give their stamp of approval that abortion was an acceptable practice. And they tacitly supported the genocide of their own communities. What fools they were. Hindsight's 20/20, I get it. But they could have at least done their research. Heck, lynching was happening. All kinds of things were happening in the United States at that time. Didn't they know that this was a KKK card-carrying woman? A racist? A eugenist? And they let her in the church house. Message to our women: take these pills. You can't afford these children. And that morphed into kill your child. You can't afford this child. Go ahead, kill it. Kill this child. You need to go to school. Kill your child. And now, blacks, who are 14% of the population in the United States. Black women, 7% of the population in the United States. About 4% of them are of childbearing years. And we make up 38% of all abortions in the United States, according to the Center for Disease Control, that famous organization, the CDC. And it's believed, as I said earlier, that over 62 million babies have been aborted since 1973, and 20 million of those are believed to be black lives. Thank God Dobbs was overturned. Yeah, we need to be celebrating that. Saving lives. Somebody ought to be happy about saving lives. And so we need to render a judgment on this demonic practice. We need to put it into sentencing. We need to get a probation report with a recommendation of what we need to be doing about this horrible scourge on this country. We talk about slavery. Well, we got 20 million babies gone who were people who had a purpose in this life. We need to judge, and we need to judge harshly, just like we would any other criminal who've come before us in the public square. And I'm rendering my judgment. You render yours according to your own conscience and according to what your God tells you. And if that God is Jesus Christ, there's not a lot of wiggle room here. And so I'm telling you, the judgment is guilty. Abortion is guilty. The pastors that stood with Margaret Sanger, blood on their hands, guilty. Margaret Sanger, guilty. Pastors preaching from the pulpit, leading men and women into sin, aborting their children, guilty. Men and women who marched themselves to the abortion clinic, guilty. Now, that's just the truth. But here is the grace. There's no condemnation in Christ Jesus. When Jesus met the woman caught in the sin of adultery, after running all the sinners off who had rocks in their hands, he said to her, "Is there anyone here to condemn you?" And she looked around. She said, "No, sir, no one." "Neither do I condemn you," Jesus said. And here's the message. To everyone listening who thought maybe I was taking too much of a harsh hand, here's the message. Jesus said, now that you've heard the word, go. Sin no more. Don't you do it again. You are forgiven. We got an election. These things are on the ballot. Vote a biblical worldview so that you can look in the mirror and know, even though the person might not have been a part of your party, you need to vote your values. You need to vote a biblical worldview. And that will be a part of God healing our land. Repent and vote. This is the Marc Little Show. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action. If you'd like to find out how you can bookmark for your next speaking engagement, go to cureaction.com. That's cure-action.com. And then just click on the Bookmark tab. Also, if you want to ensure that our government is working for the people, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to keep up with the latest from our nation's capital. You can sign up for that at cureaction.com. Again, that's cure-action.com. Finally, be sure to follow Marc on his social media pages. On Instagram, search for Real Marc with a C, T Little. And on Facebook and Twitter, just type in Marc with a C, Little in your internet browser. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition of the Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action.
The Marc Little Show is brought to you by Cure America Action Incorporated. Cure America Action is a 501c4 nonprofit organization that advocates for conservative principles based on Christianity, capitalism, and the Constitution. The organization engages in social warfare activity and promotes policies and legislation in distressed zip codes throughout America. To learn more about Cure America Action, you can visit us at cure-action.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action.